And we are live. Hello and welcome everybody to the Biology of Bliss webinar. I am so pumped for today's class, you guys. This is probably my favorite subject to teach out of all the curriculum I teach from Ford University. Today's topic is, for me, the most exciting because, number one, it really just represents the culmination of everything that I teach, which is about how to get to the fourth density of consciousness. What is the fourth density? And how do we get from the third, where we currently are, to the fourth? And the way we do that has everything to do with what we're talking about today, which is the science of Kundalini awakening. This is a topic that I think that for some reason, it's kind of enigmatic to me, to be honest, is just not talked about very much in the spiritual world. There's been some great books and works written on it, don't get me wrong, but in the kind of wider modern space of spiritual thought leaders and teachers, you don't really see many people teaching the intricacies of, hey, what is this crazy phenomenon called Kundalini awakening? Surely it must represent something so significant. And if so, what is that? That's what we're going to talk about today, because I really think this can be one of the most beneficial things to our whole collective consciousness, our entire planetary civilization, in that everybody who makes this upgrade from third to fourth density consciousness, which is only possible by awakening Kundalini, contributes a tremendous spiritual benefit to the planet. I think our spiritual frequency in the fourth density is exponentially higher in its impact on the planetary sphere. And so each one of us that upgrades our nervous system to the fourth density state is emitting a higher frequency to the planet, which raises up the whole tide with it, so to speak. And so each and every one of you that commits to this work we're going to talk about today, I consider a great honor and am greatly thankful for your contribution to this work, because all I can do is teach this stuff and leave it up to the rest of you to take it and run with it. And so thank you for being here today and just being interested in this work. And I think you're going to find today's webinar to be utterly exciting beyond belief, at least if you're anything like me. So before I jump in, please put in the chat where you're tuning in from. And again, thank you all so much for being here today. Quick caveat before we dive in, I'm kind of coming off of a sinus detox this week. So if my voice sounds a little bit, congested or whatever, or I clear my throat a little more than usual, now you'll know why. But I feel awesome today and I'm super excited for this webinar. So let's go ahead and dive right into it, guys. We've got a lot of material to cover today. So you'll be sent this webinar after the fact if you want to review the video, of course. But yeah, I want to keep this to about 90 minutes, guys. So we're just going to jump right into the fire and get rocking. All right, so this is the Biology of Bliss, how to safely awaken Kundalini. So first things first, let's get present. Please silence your phone, grab your notebook, and let's dive in. So here's what you're going to learn about today. In this training, you'll learn all about the science and practice of Kundalini awakening, what this process truly is, what it represents for one's spiritual evolution, and how it can be self-induced and self-paced for maximum efficacy. So you'll get a clear understanding of what Kundalini awakening truly is, why Kundalini awakenings can be painful and turbulent, how to safely and effectively awaken Kundalini and enter 4D consciousness, the science and metaphysics of Kundalini awakening in the central nervous system, and how to self-pace the process based on your symptomology and intensity. We also do a fun IG Live challenge whenever I do these webinars, where you can sort of screenshot any slide you want that stands out to you and post about it on Instagram. And you can tag me and the 4D University page, and we'll be reposting your story on my story tomorrow after the event. So how do you know if this training is suitable for you? If you or someone you know is experiencing a turbulent Kundalini awakening, and of course, need help navigating that. If you want to learn how to self-facilitate this process for your own spiritual evolution, or if you want to understand the principles and practices for maximum integration of fourth density consciousness. All right? Now, just a quick note about how I learned about Kundalini awakening. I don't have the time to go into my entire backstory, but I have a video on YouTube where I talk about it if you're interested. But suffice to say that in early 2021, I began experiencing bizarre symptoms in my body, which I came to learn were called kriyas, which means Kundalini symptoms. My Kundalini awakening was not blissful at first, but quite the opposite. The pain and turbulence created a passionate obsession to understand all the inner workings of Kundalini awakening and how to properly manage it. I began creating my own daily practice routine from what I was learning, which quickly transformed my awakening experience from brutal to blissful. And today I'll be sharing this knowledge with you. So in other words, all of this information is not just something I learned in books or videos or whatever. These are things I learned from my own direct experience. And of course, the practices and techniques and so forth, and some of the methodologies, I did learn from books and teachers and texts. But the way I've put these teachings together into a cohesive structure and format that you can follow is basically because this is the exact formula that I used to navigate my own spiritual awakening. When I was in a kind of do or die situation with it, I had no idea what Kundalini awakening was when it began awakening. So I had to learn as fast as possible and begin integrating these practices to sort of salvage the experience I was going through. And so let's begin the actual training itself and get into the lessons. Grab your notebook if you want to take notes, and we'll dive in. So the first question to me is like, why does Kundalini matter? We should all be able to answer this question, right? The first answer for me is Kundalini awakening matters because it represents our graduation from the third density of consciousness to the fourth density. So it kind of couldn't be a bigger deal in this regard. This is the meta arc that our souls are on, right? We're navigating or traveling through the densities of consciousness in the universe through spiritual evolution. Number two is that if you're interested in spiritual awakening and ego death and these kinds of things, Kundalini allows you to have a rapid acceleration of the ego death process. So you can get through it a lot quicker than you would be able to without it in a third density state. And third, Kundalini awakening represents the unlocking of your spiritual potential. We'll get into this more in a minute in the presentation, but Kundalini awakens so many dormant gifts and abilities and passions that you didn't even know you had. Something called your inner genius begins to awaken. Your soul's unique signature or skill set that allows you to express who you are in a deeper way through your gifts and abilities and talents. Kundalini unlocks your spiritual potential unlike anything else can. And that, I think, makes it very important. So we begin with this premise, right? Kundalini represents the transition process from the yellow ray energy center to the green ray, in that all human beings are born with the lower three energy centers in full activation, red, orange, and yellow. Animals, by comparison, only have the first two, red and orange. And so what we're trying to do is to move our locus of consciousness, meaning the domain of awareness that our consciousness hangs out in, from that solar plexus, which represents ego and self-seeking and control and so forth, and raising it to a higher frequency of love and unity and oneness, and to live from that state or that chakra. Kundalini awakening is the process of upgrading the nervous system to allow us to live from that higher frequency of consciousness permanently, which would otherwise literally not be possible. The human body would be a kind of built-in limitation that kept us from being able to sustain those higher fourth density frequencies, which, as we know, can tend to be very fleeting, right? Bliss and joy and ecstasy and divine intimacy with God. We have these experiences for moments, but they come and go very quickly because we have to upgrade the nervous system, right? To hang out in these higher states of consciousness. So the first thing about Kundalini awakening is really finding your why. In other words, why do I want to awaken Kundalini? Is it just so I can have some spiritual bragging points with my friends? Or to feel self-validated that, yeah, I must be very spiritually advanced if I'm awakening my Kundalini. That feels good. Is it an ego-driven motive? Or is it a truly divine motive? And you can know by answering this question. Am I willing to do the inner work necessary to facilitate this process? Am I at the point in my spiritual journey where I am ready to face all of my shadows? This is another important question. You won't have to face them all at once necessarily or right away, but at some point in your Kundalini awakening process, she will show you every single shadow that you have not healed and integrated. So if there's some really deep traumas in the system that you've been running from, are you ready to face those at some point? And maybe you could work towards the courage that it takes to face those before you really begin stimulating your Kundalini awakening. Am I willing to be patient and consistent in my practices, even if it takes longer than I expect? This is another good filtering question, right? Is it your ego or your soul that wants this? Because the ego wants everything fast and immediate, right now. If it doesn't work, in a few days, I'm out of here, wasting my time, right? Well, the soul doesn't think that way. The soul sees the eternal value of what you're doing and is fully willing to take as much time as it requires. Number 5, is my spiritual ascension the most important thing in my entire life? And if you can answer that question with a strong yes, then you are definitely ready for this. So now let's get to the what. What is a Kundalini awakening? And I'm going to give you 3 perspectives, okay? The first perspective is that Kundalini awakening is a neurobiological process, as we've said, upgrading the nervous system to a higher frequency. The second perspective is that Kundalini awakening is a spiritual ascension process. It is an advanced stage of spiritual progression where the heart chakra becomes fully opened and activated. In other words, activated on a permanent basis, not just when you're with family, friends, and loved ones or your children. These experiences give us temporary heart activations, right? We feel love, we feel connected to God, and in church when we're worshiping with beautiful music. And then we go get in our car and drive home and flip people off on the highway, right? So it didn't last very long, in other words. Well, this process makes it last. It makes it a new default mode network. And the third perspective is that it is literally the activation of the green ray body. And this is more of a concept taught from the law of one, but ascension to the 4th density level activates the 4th density or green ray body, which has a whole host of amazing implications, some of which we'll get into in this presentation today. So let's look at the first one, the neurobiological transformation. When a certain amount of spiritual evolution and preservation of sexual energy is reached, the human nervous system begins a long and complex process of using sex hormones and nutrients to upgrade the nervous system from a 3rd density to a 4th density frequency in order to facilitate the higher levels of consciousness now functioning in the brain. This is something called the nectar cycle. And you may have heard of it in other terms, such as the sacred secretion of the Christ oil. That's a very popular one. You've heard the microcosmic orbit from the Taoist tradition. And of course, from the Hindu tradition, it's described as Shakti and Shiva's Amrita, from their sort of lovemaking in the third eye, dripping down the spine. So there's all these different ways that different cultures have described this process of Kundalini essentially taking our sexual energy, moving it up the spine towards the brain, and then after a certain while of saturating the brain, it begins to drip back down the spine, actually down the back of the throat, which is part of the process. And this represents sort of the end phase of the upgrade process. The Hindu tradition or yogic tradition teaches that there are 3 main nadis, or energy channels in Sanskrit, which flow along the spine. There is the central channel, which is the spinal column, called the Sushumna Nadi. The masculine channel on the right side of the spine is called the Pingala Nadi, which takes in the cosmic prana from the crown and spirals it downwards. So this one right here, right? Coming in through the crown, spiraling down. The feminine channel on the left side of the spine is called the Ida Nadi, which takes in the earthly prana, also called sexual energy, and spirals it upwards. When a certain level of heart chakra activation is achieved, Kundalini begins her ascension journey through the nadis and the entire subtle energy body, purifying all distortions in her path. So it's really the conjunction or conjoining of masculine and feminine energies at the root chakra. When we can clear enough space in those lower 3 bottom chakras, which contain the ego and all of our distortions, right? When we can open up a smooth enough channel for that cosmic downward spiraling prana to hit the root chakra, which takes a lot of purification, right? Well, now the masculine and feminine are joined at the root, and they come together up the sushumna and create this massive explosion of energy up the spine, which is essentially a lightning bolt in the human body being discharged through the crown. And I'm going to show you a video of a lightning strike that explains the metaphysics of this process perfectly. Let's continue for now. To summarize, the Ida Nadi is lunar energy, feminine energy, obviously, emotional energy or earthly prana, and is known as the Shakti quality. The Pingala is solar energy or mental, and cosmic prana, the divine masculine, known as the Shiva quality. So we're just dealing with perfect polarities, masculine, feminine, yin yang, solar, lunar, and so forth. The third perspective was, again, the activation of the fourth density body. So a quick note about this. Each of our 7 chakras correlates to one of the 7 densities of the universe. So our chakras are literally the densities of the universe in miniature, in all of us. Each density represents in the universe exactly what each chakra represents in the individual. Humanity is currently a 3rd density race, which is now beginning to move into the 4th density. That is, from the locus of consciousness resting in the solar plexus chakra to the heart chakra, from the density of ego separation to the density of love and unity. Now, this is a quote from a Quo channeling that one of our members found in 40U a couple of years ago, because I've had this theory for many years through studying the Law of One and studying Kundalini Awakening, that it seems to me, although Ra doesn't say this explicitly in the Law of One, but based on what I know of the Green Ray Energy Center and the Green Ray body and these things, and of Kundalini, I sort of put the pieces together and said, you know, I think what we call Kundalini Awakening is literally just the full activation of the heart chakra, the Green Ray coming online in the nervous system. I'm wearing my Green Ray activated shirt, which is our 4DAP shirt in 40 University, which represents this, right? You becoming a 4th density being by turning on the 4th chakra permanently. And the big benefit of this, again, is that it also makes you fully eligible for 4th density graduation after this life, meaning you don't have to come back to a 3rd density planet again if you don't want to. And so I didn't have any clear evidence of this from the Law of One material, of course, but the Eleanor research team has done other channelings for the last 40 some odd years with an entity named Quo, which is a combination of like 2 or 3 different social memory complexes, one of them being Ra from the Law of One, speaking as like a group mind. So somebody found this channeling session from March 3rd, 2018, where the question was asked, when a person has a Kundalini rising experience, is that the activation of their 4th density energy body? I am Quo, and am aware of your query, my brother. The rising of the Kundalini to the Indigo Ray Energy Center is that which you may indeed describe as the activation of the 4th density body, that of the Green Ray Energy Center, which is then fully energized to be able to experience the higher vibrations now engulfing your planet, so that these vibrations may be shared. So I'll stop there. So this quote to me was like, I almost jumped for joy when I read this quote, because it is the perfect confirmation of this theory I'd had for a number of years, that Kundalini Awakening has never been really described as this in any tradition I've found, but it is a very simple thing. It is the turning on of the 4th energy center in the nervous system and the activating of that Green Ray energy through your nervous system and your auric field. In other words, you are becoming a 4th density being, and Kundalini is the upgrade process that the universe built into our nervous system. I mean, how incredible is that? Do we not live in the most divine, magical universe ever? I mean, come on, guys, it's incredible. So here's a picture representation of this. You can see that each chakra has its own energy body, right? So this is the Red Ray Energy Center. And this is our primal defense kind of center, right? When you get into a fight or flight state, all your energy bodies retract and you just have this small little red ray aura at that moment because you're pulling your energy in for safety and protection, right? But each chakra has an increasingly wider body. You can see the orange ray right there, followed by the yellow ray, which stems out quite a bit wider. And then the green ray we can see is far wider than the other 3. So you're literally increasing your energy field. You're expanding it. so that you can feel and sense your environment through the heart in a more powerful way. You can feel and sense the feelings and even thoughts of other beings so that you can be of service to them, as Quo said. So this is really important stuff for our spiritual development, I think. Now, if you aren't familiar with the law of one, I'm just going to breeze through this, but it's also good for us to rehearse the basics, right? What is a density? What even is this term density we're using? We know the first density is the red ray density of pure being. So this is when consciousness is in a kind of static state of earth, water, fire, air, and space. So consciousness needs to spend billions of years in the first density, learning and developing through the interaction of these elements before it moves to the second density, which now the photon of light is vibrating fast enough to begin to perceive the environment and a sense of self. So we have everything from the mineral to the vegetable to the insect and animal kingdoms is what spans the second density. So anything that has growth and movement in its environment that needs its environment to survive, that would be a second density being. But as consciousness evolves through the second density, the photon begins to vibrate fast enough now to become self-aware, as with human beings, to conceptually and mentally understand, I exist. I am a person in time and space with my own personal history and desires and wishes for the future. These are ideas animals and minerals and insects can't have yet because they only have the first two energy centers in activation, whereas humans are unique, except for I think maybe like dolphins or elephants might have a yellow ray in a weaker form. But as far as we know, humans are the only species that is truly self-aware in this regard. And then the next density of consciousness is the fourth, of course, which is the density of love and unity. So in other words, most human beings who don't have this chakra turned on yet, the frequency of their photons in their body is literally not vibrating fast enough to perceive the connection between all things. So everything genuinely looks and feels separate and disconnected to people. So it's no wonder that they fight and rage and all these things, right? And suffer, because that's the reality they subjectively seem to see. So we are saved by the fourth density as we enter it from the belief in separation that absolutely pervades third density. So getting to the fourth density is what everybody's looking for, whether they know it or not. It is the end of human suffering. And the farther into it we get, the less and less we will suffer. Now, there's a whole new set of challenges in the fourth density, but let me tell you, they are a whole lot better than the challenges in third density. So that's a little bit about the densities there. I want to now address the question we began with of sort of why is bliss so fleeting for human beings? Well, if we look at this scale of consciousness, which was pioneered by David Hawkins, we have these basic levels of consciousness, right? And so it's important to understand where third and fourth density rests here. So everything from shame, 25 LOC, all the way to 200 at courage, the yellow color here, would represent the third density spectrum. So this is where humans live. At best, humans can be courageous. At worst, they can be ashamed, apathetic, fearful, angry, prideful, right? And we can't truly live from these higher energies of trust, acceptance, love, and bliss until we raise our consciousness above the third density level. So we're trying to increase the RPMs, right? The third density nervous system, or yellow ray body, does not have the bandwidth to sustain the frequency of bliss for very long. This energy burns out the nervous system and causes it to quickly crash back down to baseline. So here we have RPMs get maxed out, and just like in a car engine, back down to baseline. This is when we feel die-offs and dark nights of the soul following blissful experiences. Because to remain in states of love, bliss, or peace requires an upgraded nervous system. A yellow ray nervous system is not equipped to handle green ray energies on a sustained basis. To experience them as abiding states, the nervous system must be upgraded from yellow to green. Spiritual progress towards love puts a demand on the CNS to begin this process. So once we get above this range in our nervous system's capacity, we can experience bliss. on a regular basis. And I don't think anybody can experience like devastating, MDMA level bliss at all times. I don't even think you would necessarily want to, right? At some point, you'd want to come a bit back down to ordinary consciousness with everybody else. But can you keep a background level of bliss, a feeling of kind of subdued joy, a deep inner peace that is there at all times? Yes, my friends, that is exactly what fourth density consciousness feels like. And let me tell you, it is quite a gift to be able to cultivate this level of consciousness in yourself. So what are the benefits of Kundalini awakening? Like, why would this be worth shooting for if we have to face all our shadows and demons to get to it? Well, first, it's the transcendence of suffering, the end of suffering. And I think that's reason enough for most of us. But second, as I said, it is the awakening of our inner genius, meaning when you get to a fourth density frequency level in your mind, in your awareness, in your nervous system, it will awaken all kinds of inner genius you did not know you had, or maybe that you did know you had, but had no idea of the potential that was awaiting to be unlocked. A lot of people say if you're really good at something, Kundalini will make you a genius at it, but only after you get through the full process, right? It creates greatly enhanced intuition, of course, being that it is the permanent activation of the heart chakra, which is the center of intuition. If you want to be a more powerfully intuitive person, Kundalini awakening will definitely do that in a huge way. It unlocks healing power, the ability to actually heal others, so to speak. Of course, everyone heals themselves, but somebody with a powerful green ray energy field can offer the solution that someone's looking for in their own energy field and allow someone to heal themselves through the environment that we create. So it looks like one person's healing another. It's not quite that way in metaphysics, but essentially you've got to have the energy of the solution in your own energy field for someone to be able to use it to heal themselves in your presence. So that's what Kundalini allows us to do. It represents the purification of our karma. We are purifying our karmic debt, which is something that's very important for graduation. Kundalini awakening allows great psychic abilities to develop. This is one of the hallmarks you hear from people who awaken Kundalini is all kinds of psychic gifts tend to come online because love, the green ray frequency, is the energy that connects everything. So good luck reading someone's thoughts if you don't feel any love for them, right? In the quantum world, you are not connected to that person until you love them. You are essentially disconnecting yourself from them. So love is what joins us to everything, which allows us to have psychic abilities come online. It extends the human lifespan greatly and significantly when it's handled appropriately, right? And not just blowing the circuit boards or something. But in the right, healthy way, it's extremely life extending. And finally, it allows us to have genuine fulfillment and joy in our service to others. When the heart chakra is online, you can't imagine the joy, the deep fulfillment you get from blessing other people. It's like you just can't wait to find the next person to bless. And that is also a giant blessing to your own spiritual development. So I wanted to show this slide just to give you an idea of how Kundalini allows you to work through your blockages much better. When you're under a third density nervous system before Kundalini awakening, it's like you have a small amount of leverage to lift your blockages out of the way, right? This little kettlebell represents your blockages. And so you have to pull really hard. It's super difficult to move your blockages. But when you awaken Kundalini and you move your nervous system to a fourth density frequency, it's like you're extending the lever arm. You have more leverage, so it's easier to pull down and move up your blockages, remove your blockages, right? You have more power working for you. And so inner healing and shadow work is honestly just way easier when you have an active green ray energy center. Now let's talk about some of the dangers and pitfalls. What are the potential dangers of Kundalini awakening, and how can we be sure to mitigate them? Also, what is the safest way to awaken this energy? I would say that the three main pitfalls of Kundalini awakening, as I've come to see them, is number one, just having too many impurities or distortions in the chakras. And this goes with the physical body as well. One of the worst things you can do is try to awaken Kundalini aggressively when you have a very unhealthy physical body. And if you have a very unhealthy physical body, that's an expression of the fact that you have many blockages and distortions in your chakras. So the two always kind of go together. But yeah, suffice to say, this is not a good idea. If you're unhealthy physically and spiritually, and you try to awaken Kundalini, that's when you have the hellacious, painful, difficult types of Kundalini awakenings. Number two is just rushing the process. Too much, too soon, too fast, right? If you're not pacing yourself and you're asking for everything at once, you can bite off a lot more than you can chew. And that's when the sense of overwhelm and disorientation sets in. So self-pacing is really important in this process. And number three is premature crown opening. So this is something that mostly happens at, Kundalini retreats, or, there's some well-known people in the space that travel around the world and put on these kinds of retreats where they're teaching people to do these really fast, intense, long breathwork sessions to intense music and drums to essentially force an inner conjunction, a Kundalini lightning bolt to happen in the body. And yeah, you can do this. And it can be a wonderful, blissful experience at a retreat. But again, when this happens, you have set off this process and there is no going back. There is no off button for Kundalini in the nervous system. And once she awakens, she's kind of merciless in a way. She doesn't really care about what's in her path. She just cares about getting up to Shiva, her lover, in the third eye, and burning through anything in her way. And Shiva is also playing the flute and serenading Shakti up the spine. So yeah, they're lovers. They're going to find each other, right? And if you got blockages in the way, too bad. They're going to get burnt. And that can be really painful and difficult, right? So I'm not a huge fan of the let's blast off people's Kundalinis at a retreat because it sells tickets and stuff, and just leaving people disoriented and discombobulated and uneducated on how do I handle this process now going forward. I think it's somewhat irresponsible, to put it lightly. And so I'll leave it there for now, but this is why I teach the gradual method where you can facilitate this process on a daily basis, monitor your own progress, and decide how much you want to put your foot on the gas pedal or the brake, right? So what are the solutions to these three problems? Well, number one, too many impurities in the body or the chakras, is to practice inner purification before it's too late, right? Begin practicing inner purification. And that's what we do in my program, 40 APs. We begin first with inner purification, setting the stage for a smooth, effective Kundalini awakening. Number two, rushing the process. The solution is build a foundation of inner stillness and self-awareness. A good working amount of inner stillness and self-awareness is extremely helpful for Kundalini awakening. Number three, premature crown opening. The solution to me is to focus instead on balancing the lower energy centers before you try to activate the higher centers. Let's talk about the inner conjunction really quick. So most people, when they think about a Kundalini awakening, they think about the event that happens, right? The lightning bolt up the spine. The back arches, the eyes roll back, and people just go into cosmic consciousness. And all kinds of amazing experiences happen. Divine, blissful experiences that positively change people's lives forever. This happened to me in 2021. But I want to stress that that event is actually not what a Kundalini awakening is. It neither represents the beginning nor the end or the culmination of it. It is something that happens when a big enough charge has been built up in the root chakra that needs to eventually be discharged through the crown. And so by the time an energy needs to be discharged through the crown, you've already been building up Kundalini energy for a while, right? Maybe slowly over years or whatever, but it's already happening. And it definitely doesn't represent the end of a Kundalini awakening, because the end of a Kundalini awakening would mean you don't need to discharge energy any longer because you've built a nervous system that can sustain it and hold it, right? So I call it the inner conjunction because it's, again, the conjunction of that masculine, feminine energy, the Ida and Pingala nadis coming together in that central channel, the Sushumna, and blasting up the spine. There's a couple things I want to say on this. When enough of a charge is built up in the root chakra, the negative or south pole, in response to, and these are the two ingredients, guys, sexual energy preservation, and heart chakra activation. That's the recipe. Then this energy will seek to discharge towards the positive or North Pole. This is when the famous lightning bolt event occurs, which many experience during a Kundalini awakening. This event does not signal the beginning of Kundalini's awakening, but only that a powerful charge has been created. So it's a sign of great progress for sure. Eventually, the nervous system is upgraded and able to hold this higher level of energy, and therefore no more discharges are required. So you may have actually a number of inner conjunctions during your Kundalini awakening process. I had 3 myself, one that was super intense, one that was more moderate, and one that was very, very light. But I want to give you guys a real world analogy for what is actually happening. Because again, this event is so crazy to most people. You know, religious people think it's demonic, it's a demon possession. Like no one has a clue what it is. Well, I'm going to tell you what it is. Kundalini awakening is a lightning bolt in the human body. When lightning strikes, as in this video, the cloud, which has all this static energy up here that needs to discharge, sends down negative electricity. And the first bolt that touches the ground gets the positive charge right there, and it shoots upward. So you've heard some people say, lightning actually strikes upwards. Well, it's kind of true. First, the static field in the cloud sends down the negative electricity, and all these different tentrails are seeking to find the earth first. And the first one that finds it, boom! You get this enormous discharge of energy towards the positive pole. This is exactly what's happening in the human body. A static field is being built up in the root chakra through what? Preservation of sexual energy, right? That's the first ingredient. Build up a huge static field, a storehouse of sexual prana in the body. Don't be wasting it and using it, right? And then you have the second ingredient, heart chakra activation, which is doing what? It's calling down from the crown chakra, the cosmic prana into the body. When you activate the heart, you need more cosmic prana to turn it on. The heart chakra is one of the upper 3 energy centers. So it is fed by cosmic prana, the masculine, right? Whereas the lower 3 chakras are fed by the feminine energy, the earthly prana or sexual energy. So when you get those two working together, a huge static field at the root, so it's kind of an upside down lightning strike, right? You get this huge buildup of sexual energy, and then this massive influx of energy spiraling down, like the negative electricity. When it finally reaches that root and you have a big enough static charge built up, boom, that thing's going to discharge and you're going to be along for the ride. So again, that's not the culmination of a Kundalini awakening, but it is a massive sign of success. And most of the students in our program experience some level of interconjunction within weeks or months of doing the program. And we've had a number of students have their interconjunction happen during the program itself within the first 8 weeks or something. And although that's more rare, most people have it after the program because it takes time to build this charge up. Everyone's at a different level. And so if you've been, in a devoted spiritual practice for a long time, and if you have a deep love relationship with God, you're definitely more primed for this experience to happen. So all you need is to make sure you're doing both of these ingredients, right? You're saving up your sexual energy as much as possible, and you're cultivating a deeper heart chakra, loving God with all your heart, loving your neighbor as yourself, being of service to others, living in a kind of love affair with the divine. When you do those two things, you guys, your Kundalini is gonna blast off. It's inevitable. So this leads us to something called ecstatic conductivity. This is a term we teach about in the program itself, 40AP. Ecstatic conductivity is building a static field in the subtle body. The subtle body is the energy body. Number one, it is through the awakening of green ray energy within the nervous system. So the more that the green ray is awakened, the more we feel these tingling electrical energies in our meditations and in our breath work. And this is one of the major signs or hallmarks of progress that we teach in our program, is that you should be looking for subtle effects of ecstatic conductivity to know that your practice is working effectively. There's real measurable things we can observe in the body to know that what we're doing is working. So it's one of the barometers we use. I've just went over that. It is the result of sexual energy being sublimated up the spinal nerve, which builds the charge. So a lot of times you'll start to feel the spine getting hot and tingly during the practices we teach in 40AP. And this represents that your sexual energy is being successfully moved up the spine, because sexual energy is extremely electromagnetic. It has a strong electrical charge. And so when it's moving along the spine, you feel it, especially in meditation. And then finally, this prepares the CNS for the inner conjunction and primes our subtle pathways for Kundalini. So this is the reason why in 40AP we focus on cultivating ecstatic conductivity in our meditations and our breathwork practices. We want to get into these practices so that we're enjoying them and moving that sexual energy upwards, and we start to feel the body tingling during our practices. And if you can get to this point in your practice, then you know for sure that you are really setting a strong, safe foundation for when that inner conjunction happens. Meaning it's not just going to blow the circuit board wide open, as it does for most people, right? Who, again, come back from these retreats totally discombobulated, oftentimes in a kind of psychosis. And many people in the world awaken their Kundalini and don't even know what it is. And they end up in psych wards on psych drugs, because doctors certainly have no freaking clue what this is either. And so it's important to educate people, right? And this is one of the most important things you can do, is begin to cultivate this ecstatic conductivity before you have the inner conjunction, so that you're actually priming all the nervous system and the subtle pathways where that energy is going to express as it blows through the system, right? And then you're going to be prepared to actually handle the experience. You've built the foundation, right? That's required for it. So what does ecstatic conductivity feel like? Well, it feels like a pleasant, tingling sensation along the spine and usually in the extremities. Now, most people will first feel ecstatic conductivity in the crown, because that's where the cosmic prana is coming in. So just like an inch or so above your scalp, you'll start to feel a lot of tingling during these practices. And that's a sign of the energy is beginning to formulate in the subtle body. And you'll eventually feel it along the spine, through your arms and legs, and especially through the meridians in your fingers and feet and so forth. It's very thread-like and can range from subtle to very euphoric. I've had countless sessions doing these practices where I'm just lost in bliss for like 30 minutes or something, just feeling all the orgasmic sensations happening in the body and all the electrical energy fluttering through the body like butterflies or something. It really is an incredible experience. And it can also feel like electrical heat moving in the nervous system, something I call volcano veins, which I'll touch on here in a few slides. And it really just represents the difference between the energy we're cultivating and our capacity. So ecstatic conductivity happens as we're moving from third density to fourth density. When the energy is higher than our capacity, we feel it in the form of these tingling sensations along our meridians and spine and so forth. But as we expand the nervous system, which happens months, sometimes a year or more into this practice, we actually notice that ecstatic conductivity tends to subside. And, I still feel strong crown activations, sometimes third eye, and every so often along the spine, but nothing like when I was going through this process. It was unbelievably physiological through my whole body. I couldn't even find the words to explain to somebody how I would feel. You have to experience it to believe it. It's very, very real. And it happens for a certain while, because this energy, almost like a pot of boiling water or something, right? You put a pot on the stove, turn on the heat, and that fire's burning, but the water's not boiling yet. And gradually, day by day, or moment by moment, the water starts to boil, and then it becomes extremely hot and steaming and all that. The energy we feel is doing that. It's cooking us from the inside out and gradually turning up the temperature or the frequency in our nervous system. So we pay attention to the presence of ecstatic conductivity in the body as a great sign of progress. Now, this is the final thing I'm going to give you today, which is the essential Kundalini formula that 40AP is based on, which is K equals E times C divided by R. Kundalini equals energy times capacity divided by resistance. So your Kundalini awakening will be as effective as you can combine the energy of it with your capacity to hold it and as little resistance as possible. The more we resist the process with fear and whatever else, the more we're going to slow it down and interfere with the process, right? So we have to deal with our shadows and fears to lower the resistance and increase the capacity. But this is essentially what everything is oriented around, is these three variables are very, very important. And the program of 40AP tries to balance these three variables. So this is the density spectrum, just to give you an idea of what fourth density looks like. David Hawkins calibrates third density from 1 to 1,000. But the fourth density begins at 1,000 and calibrates all the way to 5,000. And so this is why awakening fourth density energy is extremely beneficial for your quality of life and, of course, your spiritual evolution, because it is a up to 5 times more powerful energy than is a third density energy. And so the densities continue from there, fifth density being beginning at 5,000 LOC to 20,000, 20,000 to 60,000 in the sixth density, and 60 to 120,000 in the seventh. So just to give you some perspective, right? This is where we are, little third density beings. And we have some avatars like Christ and the Buddha who unlocked the full 1,000 LOC and became fourth density beings in this lifetime. And so we all have this great opportunity, which I think is just the most exciting thing possible, personally. So how do we know when Kundalini awakening ends? Well, it doesn't end until there's full transmutation of all blockages, right? As I said, Kundalini is a purifying fire, and she will not stop her cleansing pathway until she has cleared all obstacles out of her way. And so those obstacles appear in our chakras, right? Really just the lower three. But the upper three here, green, blue, and indigo, are the centers we're trying to turn on and activate, which happens to the degree we balance these lower three. So really, it's these lower three here, the transcendence of survival fears, healed physical and sexual traumas, the transcendence of cravings and addictions, full acceptance of self, transcendence of jealousy and insecurity, power over others, courage for doing the inner work, becoming truly self-empowered. These are the big things we have to embody before our process can be completed. And Kundalini will keep helping us work on these things, bringing them up for us until we do. So here's a recap of what we talked about today. Kundalini awakening is the neurobiological process of the subtle body upgrading from a third to a fourth density frequency. Kundalini awakenings can be disorienting and painful when we do not understand what is happening or how to manage it. Self-pacing is essential for cultivating a blissful and successful Kundalini awakening. Shakti, or Kundalini, awakens in response to a combination of heart chakra activation and sexual energy preservation. The most effective method of Kundalini awakening, therefore, is to fall deeply in love with the divine, such that your life feels like a love story between you and God. So this is the ultimate answer to the question, how do I awaken my Kundalini? The answer is simple. Fall in love with God like you've fallen in love with the most intense romantic partner you've ever had. Easier said than done, right? But think about the way that, your first love in high school or whatever captured your heart like nothing else. I mean, you could hardly stand a second without thinking about that person. And in every spare second of your time, when you're not doing some task, you're fantasizing about being with them, and your heart is calling to them, and you can't wait to be with them again. This is how we should come to love God, my friends. And if you can cultivate this level of love relationship with God, I'm telling you from personal experience, there is nothing in this life that can touch this experience. There's nothing more fulfilling. There's nothing more rewarding. There is nothing more worth living for than this. So that's why our formula in 40AP begins with a focus of bhakti yoga, which is devotional yoga. So here's the fourth density ascension protocol, a 12-week Kundalini awakening protocol for spiritual seekers ready to embody higher frequencies, expand their nervous system, and become a fourth density being. I'm going to show you what the protocol really is. Number 1, devotion to God. So this is what we call our non-sitting practice. This is our daily practice, which is everything we're doing when we're not sitting in meditation, right? We try to orient our lives in a devotional way, and we teach you what true bhakti yoga is and how to live it every second of your day, which is really very simple. But it's one of those things that's easier said than it is done, because the concept might be simple. Hey, fall in love with God and think about God a lot. You're like, cool, got it. And then you go try to do it and you're like, yeah, it's a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. So it's a practice like anything else, but it is the fire that awakens Kundalini. And we cannot awaken Kundalini without bhakti. And then number 2, below that in priority, is the twice daily practice routine, which we teach you over the 12-week period. This is what the 36 lessons in 40 AP are built for, is to teach you this practice called neurotropic breathwork, which is our sitting practice that we do in the morning. And then optionally, if you want, you can do it again in the evening. I'll show you kind of what it is. But first, let's look at bhakti yoga. So why bhakti? Simple. Because Kundalini is 4th density green ray energy. Number 2, green ray energy is generated in the heart chakra. 3, devotion activates the heart chakra. Therefore, an awakened heart chakra requires more cosmic prana, which when combined with sexual energy leads one to the inner conjunction. So again, the upper 3 centers are fed by the downward spiraling cosmic prana. So the more you put a stimulus on your heart to awaken, in other words, the more you love God and love your neighbor as yourself, the more love you feel for God and your fellow man, the more that the crown has to open in response to let more cosmic prana come in to fill that energy center and fuel it, right? So you've got the downward spiraling prana going further down, building up a stronger charge. You're building up sexual energy in the root chakra. And when those two lovers meet, Shakti and Shiva, that's what causes the inner conjunction. Now, why do we do the twice daily practice? Well, simple. A fire needs help getting started. And bhakti yoga is the fire, as we said. Devotion creates the heat, and our twice daily practice fans the flame. So if you just did neurotropic breath work that we teach you in 40 AP, but you put no effort into loving God and loving others, being of service and all that, it's like you're trying to start a fire just by blowing on a bunch of twigs, right? Someone's like, hey, dude, you need to get some heat going first. You're like, oh, yeah, okay. You get the sticks, you start rubbing them together, and you start creating the heat. And only once you've created the heat can you then blow on it to help speed it along, right? The same is true for our spiritual development. The heart chakra, the love, the devotion to God is the heat we need. And we can use yoga asanas, bandhas, and breathwork practices to literally breathe, blow on that fire, and increase the fire. So we use the two in synergy in 40 AP, and you can't have one without the other. And by doing this, we can help prepare Kundalini's path for a smoother ascension process. Much like John the Baptist said in Mark 1:3, prepare the way for the Lord, make straight the paths for him. So 40 AP begins with a baseline practice, which is 10 minutes of Kriya Pranayama and 20 minutes of deep meditation. As you go through the program, each week you learn 1 to 2 new techniques in the neurotropic breathwork that you add to that first section. And eventually, you get to about a 30-minute breathwork technique that you perform, which is a powerful nervous system expanding and stimulating practice, taken from some of the most time-tested yogic practices in history, in both the Hindu tradition, Hatha Yoga, Raja Yoga, and so forth, and the Taoist tradition, using things like the microcosmic orbit and all that. So many amazing technologies have been created for stimulating Kundalini by the ancients. And so we rely on many of those, in addition to some more modern things that science and biology has revealed. So this is a look at all of the practices you will learn in 40 AP. This is what neurotropic breathwork looks like. And it may look super, complex and overwhelming here, but it's all put together in a very simple, smooth practice, neurotropic breathwork, which you learn, again, day by day, week by week. You just add one of these each week, essentially, to the practice you're already doing. So there's actually zero learning curve because it's such a slow, gradual learning process. that, hey, just add this one new technique and do this for the next 3 to 5 days before the next lesson comes in to unlock the next technique. And they all build upon each other. And by the time we get to week 12, we have this really amazing, and in my opinion, and the opinion of our students for many years now, a really fun, really enjoyable, and rewarding spiritual practice to begin your day with that just fans the flame of your Kundalini that you can then use to take into your day to practice your bhakti with, your devotion. You can feel the presence of Kundalini active in your nervous system, and it just turns up the bhakti all the more. So I mentioned some of the symptoms of Kundalini awakening. Let's take a quick look at those. We sort of have two types of ascension symptoms in a Kundalini awakening. There's the psychological and the physical. The psychological symptoms of a Kundalini awakening can be things like apathy, just feeling a total loss of motivation for life, antisocial tendencies, not wanting to be around people very much, feeling irritable, feeling easily triggered, having quote unquote Kundalini dreams, which are like hyper vivid dreams, almost like you're in real life. And they have a lot of deep and obvious symbology in them. These are the classic Kundalini dreams people talk about. Resurfacing of old traumas is another big one. Loss of interest in third density life, just not being pulled into the illusions anymore of fame and fortune and all the stuff in the third density world that used to be very interesting and alluring to you. And finally, hypnagogic sensations, like hearing your name called from far away, hearing voices, hearing crazy sounds at night. It's another sign of Kundalini activity. Then we have the physical symptoms, which can be frequent headaches. Loss of appetite is a big one. Volcano veins, which is the heat you feel moving in your meridians and especially in your extremities, which can be very uncomfortable. Not necessarily painful, but can help you. It can be something that causes you to lose sleep and so forth. But it can be something that causes you to lose sleep for a time, which is what happened in my case. Of course, insomnia goes along with that. Insomnia is another big physical symptom that can happen when Kundalini is overwhelming the system too much. You can get hot pinpricks through the body, like little stabbing, almost like electrocutions in random places in your body all through the day. These are little discharges of energy in the cells that are kind of fighting against Kundalini. Lurching during spiritual practice or at rest. A lot of people will have this kind of effect of lurching when they're meditating or laying down. For me, it would actually happen when I was asleep and I would wake up to myself lurching. And it actually still happens today when I take naps very often, because I'll wake up with a kind of jolt. So that's interesting. Intense sweating can often happen, especially when you do neurotropic breath work. This is a huge sign of Kundalini's presence in the nervous system. It's when you start sweating a lot and feeling your body temperature rising. It can happen outside of your sitting practice, of course, but it definitely happens during the sitting practice for many of our students. And I just say, hey, just keep on rocking, bring a towel with you, and keep doing what you're doing, because this is a sign that what you're doing is clearly working. And then the last I would say is the kind of body chills or goosebumps happening a lot during practice and outside of practice can be a sign of Kundalini's process through the nervous system. So if you're interested in potentially joining 40AP with us in this next upcoming cohort, here's what you're going to get. There are 36 instructional or educational video lessons over a 12-week period. So you get 3 lessons per week, and I space them out in such a way that you have a couple of days in between each lesson to digest the lesson. Some of them are just sort of the philosophy of Kundalini and what's happening in every little facet of Kundalini. Some of them are the instructional tutorial videos of a certain technique, which I will walk through with you, and you'll do the exercises with me to learn the technique, and then I'll show you how and where it gets added into that baseline practice. And then some of them are just other video lessons about Kundalini that give you deeper insights into the process itself. So that's what the video lessons look like. It comes through, again, 12 weeks of structured fourth density training. So it's structured in a way that builds upon itself and doesn't overwhelm you with everything at once. There are 7 live calls through the program over 12 weeks where you get to ask me your questions and have full support with your integration of these practices. Of course, you're going to be doing daily breathwork, kriya, meditation, and yoga practices. We also give you what I think is the strongest practice for balancing your chakras, one of our staple or hallmark practices in 40 University, which is the Catalyst Journal. We teach the Catalyst Journal in 40 AP, and you get a bunch of other exclusive bonuses, trainings, tools to deepen your practice and accelerate integration, and of course, ongoing access. So you get our whole private community, which is such a blast to participate in. You get to meet amazing people all around the world, and you can actually see where these people live in our platform and connect with people who live near you, which a lot of our students take advantage of, and I highly recommend. But just a place to chat and discuss what's coming up for you and ask questions to the community and read other people's experiences and just feel like you're not alone in this process anymore. That's what our community is for more than anything. And of course, I get in there frequently and answer questions and talk with you guys. But it's really a place for you guys to create a kind of virtual ashram, as we said. So here's some testimonials from prior students we've had. Camille said, I've experienced a lot of spiritual systems, but 40 AP was the first one that made the awakening process feel both grounded and divine. It gave me a map, a method, and a sense of safety I didn't know I was missing. And I love that testimonial, guys, because that is what I really tried to do in building 40 AP. Was I saw this big problem that people are having Kundalini awakenings all over the world, myself included, and I, like many people, had no idea what this process was or how to manage it. And when I learned what it is and how to manage it through my own studies and practice, I thought, man, somebody needs to create a resource for people who are going through this and have no idea what's going on so that they hopefully don't end up in a psych ward or just kind of spinning out in their life for years at a time before they can gather themselves. I mean, an irresponsible approach to Kundalini awakening or just an ignorant approach can be devastatingly difficult and painful for a human being, and it doesn't have to be that way. There is a safe way and an effective, gradual way of facilitating this process as the universe designed it. And I've done my best, although it's, of course, can't be a perfect program, I've done my best to put together the best possible approach, or protocol, as I call it, for Kundalini awakening, becoming a fourth density being. So Natalie said, this work helped me to stop fighting my emotional waves and learn how to meet them with presence. I feel more emotionally regulated, more centered in my body, and more confident in how I hold my energy. Tyler A. said, I used to think bliss was something you only touched on in deep meditation, but through 40 AP, it's become my daily baseline. Even during stress, I can feel a quiet current of joy that holds everything. So Tyler's clearly one of our students who has successfully awakened his Kundalini to the extent, at least, that he's feeling this background of bliss, which I was describing earlier. And so that's the biology of bliss, my friends. It is available in you right now in potential. And all that it requires is the knowledge and the dedication to know how to unlock it.